Hello, I'm Kang Yangyi from DIVO Incorporated. The software I'll introduce today is a piece of software called SCIVO. DIVO Incorporated has released SCIVO. SCIVO is software we built after a lot of thought about how to use artificial intelligence when writing research papers. You can think of it as software that binds onto Claude Code, which many people already use. It's a web-based tool, and basically it's software where you don't do the writing yourself. You don't write anything by hand. Everything recorded on the web is written by Claude Code, and because it writes to the web, it has to follow the structure the web already has. So it's important that Claude Code doesn't just do whatever it wants. If it has too much freedom, it's hard for us to keep up, so we give it some constraints and let it work within the structure we've built. And what is that structure? It's simply the familiar structure of a research paper. But it doesn't stop at papers. We found it applies to many other kinds of documents too. So give it a try and judge for yourself. To get started, just click Get Started Free and this comes up. Right now, email signup isn't enabled. For now, it's Google signup only. So if you click Sign in with Google, there's no extra login process. When you go in, you'll probably start out on the Pro plan right away. We're in a kind of event period right now. So you'll be on Pro, and when you move to Projects, it asks you to create one. Let's make a project, for example. What should we do? Soybean. Let's call it Soybean Digital Breeding Review, a review paper. Yes, let's write a review paper. As soon as you do, a setup guide appears. And if you install things as the setup guide tells you, everything gets installed. One important thing, Mac users have no real trouble, but Windows users do. Windows users need to use something called WSL. Explaining what WSL is would take a long time, but simply put, think of it as Linux running inside Windows. So it's Linux inside Windows. Linux users are fine, Mac users are fine. And Windows is fine too. You just have to run Linux inside Windows. Once you run Linux inside Windows, you get a Linux-like terminal, just like on Linux or Mac. You can look that up on YouTube and set it up. So we can open a terminal that looks like this on a Mac. Let me show you the Mac I've opened. In my case, I usually have a working directory, so I go into Works and create a directory here. What did we call it earlier? Soybean Digital Breeding Review, right? I create it, and you can see an empty folder is made. Once that's made, you come over here. Which is a bit tedious here. Create a wget link. Create it, wait a moment while it generates, and it pops up. Then copy the wget line first. And go to your terminal. And paste it here. When you paste it, it runs. You have to install the environment first for it to go in nicely. If you don't, it won't work and it'll nag you about this and that being missing. We assume you already have Claude Code in your environment, so let's run Claude here. And since I find typing yes or no tedious, I'll use dangerously skip permissions. Then the familiar Claude Code screen appears. Once it does, let me type check the project here. Check the project. Since we just connected it to our website's project through that wget, it tells us, this is the project. Now what should we do? So first, let's say soybean. How far has digital breeding progressed? Let's research it focusing on overseas cases, especially multinational seed companies. Through a systematic review. Let's turn it into a review paper. And what was the topic of our breeding society meeting this time? How artificial intelligence, the genome, and the phenome are organically developing. Let's build it around that. I'll write it roughly like this, and then it takes over in. Researches diligently. Inside this SCIVO platform, we've packed in a lot of MCPs. MCP skills agents. Based on those, it updates the SCIVO site on its own, references it, and Claude Code reads it back and records again, repeating this over and over. You could still do this with ChatGPT. Or with Claude, or even with just Claude Code alone. But it produces so much that we can't keep up, and we end up unable to organize it. So, how nice would it be if it were documented in a neatly organized form? That was my wish, and when I tried it, it worked pretty well. Writing is really hard for students and professors alike, but LLMs are really good at writing. So, to make the most of that skill, we build a structure to use these capabilities to the fullest. We usually call this a harness, placing AI, agents, skills, and MCPs in exactly the right spots so that, in practice, it's we ourselves who make the final product, not the AI. We write under our own names, and without a document management system, that's almost impossible. In my case, I use the $200 Claude Code plan, so tokens aren't much of a problem. But if you're on the $20 plan, then use up your quota, take a break, use some more in the evening, and so on. It's actually good for time management. I use the $20 plan too. And with the $20 plan, you can just relax while you work. You set it writing and out of tokens, time to go work out. Go hang out with friends and 3 hours pass. By then the tokens you used a lot, but they've reset while you were out. So you can live productively that way. Anyway, right now, I'm not sure you can see the corner, but the tokens right now, you can see it's burning 136,000 at a time in just 2 minutes. It eats up an enormous amount because it uses so much. Actually, when I showed this SCIVO site to others, they went, you didn't put an API log into the web. You didn't add it, they asked. But I did try the API. I built a whole harness with it. And with the API, the token cost is unbearable. The token cost is unbearable, and instead, the packaged plans they sell, the $20 and $200 Claude Code plans, are really economical, really cheap. A way to buy tokens wholesale. Later, you all will end up coding with the API at some point, and it's much more expensive than you'd think. The tokens, so especially when using our SCIVO. Using the $200 plan is one option, but just to use it comfortably. Because with the $200 plan you can do not just paper writing but analysis too, tens of thousands of runs, right? So I do recommend using it that way. But if you use SCIVO, you can just use one $20 plan. Or there's a really cheap Chinese LLM, GLM. I think it's up to 5.5 now. Anyway, those are 10 times cheaper. So with them you can work very nimbly. Since I built this around a Claude Code harness, I haven't tested anything but the Claude Code harness. So please do use Claude Code. And personally, I use this system like crazy, absolutely relentlessly. Right now, the Breeding Society meeting, day 3. On July 3rd, I'm giving a keynote. And I made those slides through this system too. I'll show you later how it was made. This takes a while, so I'll pause here and come back. It researched for about 20 minutes. And now it says it's going to review that research again. In any case, when we use the Claude Code harness, we can use all the various skills the harness has. So here too, we're using the deep research function as is. The results from deep research are then reorganized by the AI. The organized results are ultimately moved into our web harness. So let's wait a while. I think the whole process takes about 40 to 50 minutes. Once it's done on our web, we can check how it turned out. All right, it's done. That really took about 40 minutes. If you look at the content, it did a great deal of work up front. This is the result of the AI diligently organizing the deep research findings on its own. And finally, it was organized through our SCIVO MCP. You can see it says CrossRef DOI Verification Complete. What does that mean? Let's go take a look to the paper. Going to the paper, there's now a box that wasn't here before. If you click the box, there are the organized papers. So if you read this, we read the content, organize it, turn it into a paper, and we're done. But the hallucination problems we always face with reference management get resolved here. Look in the introduction, DOIs are attached. When a DOI is checked, it means it's been verified. So when you click, you can see they're all properly linked. Doing a systematic review like this is really hard. Normally, you'd have to search and organize every single paper. But here, once everything is saved in paper form, you can see it's all been verified. Everything checked in green is a fully verified reference. Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning, on this platform, we never write anything ourselves. We don't write by hand. Everything is written by Claude Code. So then what can we do? What we can do here is leave comments, just like professors do. When you bring a paper, or when professors write and collaborators review, everyone leaves comments. Do this here, do that there. You write those kinds of notes right here. Let me nitpick a bit. First, digital breeding in soybean has progressed from 3 independent toolkits, genomics, phenomics, and artificial intelligence, into a single, organically integrated system, with the environment as a connecting layer. Since we're agriculture people, we might comment that we don't understand what layer means, rather than layer. Isn't there a more fitting word than layer? That's the kind of note we leave. Once you leave it, it's marked like this, and you can accept or reject it. A person clicks accept here, and it updates. And then still, you go to the code and say, check accepted, and review. Now the AI has permission, since the MCP is already all registered. It has access to the project and checks it. It does the checking these days. Claude has gotten a little slower. ChatGPT actually got much faster, while Claude got slower. Maybe too many people are using it. Here you can see the accepted comment. Isn't there a better word than layer? I used layer to mean the medium that integrates the environment, so I'll change it to something more vivid. It suggests thread. Thread doesn't seem great. Connective tissue. common reference frame, unified framework. It says it recommends thread and will resolve the comment. Since we use dangerously skip permissions, it just goes ahead. If you don't like the change, just say a word. I don't like thread, use unified framework, and it'll diligently fix it. So let's take a look at the corrected result. If we do it right here and go back, it now reads, the environment is the thread that binds them together. So you can see that just by leaving comments, everything gets resolved right here. Now we can check things this way. But there's one more thing we want. What if you'd rather have the AI review it instead of you? Then you can just run the reviewer right here. You type review, and the reviewer agent comes in and reviews. It runs the /pay-per-view skill, a predefined skill. Since it looks at the whole thing, it takes a little time, so I'll come back when it's done. All right, the review is done. Looking at it, there are about 12 issues flagged by the AI reviewer. Going back, unlike before, there are tons of replies here. These are the comments the AI left during review. Click one and it jumps to that spot and tells you what the problem is. This one's minor, uncited production statistics, meaning cited, I suppose, so we cite it. Let's look at more. This one's major. Scope boundary should be stated explicitly. We need to clearly state how far our discussion goes. So it's a bit long anyway. When these comments are made, we can reply to them again, here. There's a reply field, so we can respond to all of them and add our own opinions. But honestly, even this, you might find tedious. So we can have the AI apply these too. It says include figures and tables. It can make figures and tables or leave them out. Let's do text only. Text only and just make it state the scope boundary explicitly and run it. So the AI generates the responses. Now, the verification is complete. Going in, you can see the addressed items are marked like this, while the ones that were removed show up as hard to locate. So you can separate what was addressed from what wasn't. In this way, we can revise the paper through a kind of comment system. And now, looking at the very end, you can see the references being organized, and figures and tables can go in between. Since it takes a while, I won't cover making tables and figures in this video. Next time, when I introduce advanced techniques, I'll show you how to add figures and tables here. You can add figures with code or with generative images. For schematic flowcharts, generative images are really good. But when you need to analyze something and draw a graph, you go code-based. Since we're using Claude Code to write the paper, you can do the analysis itself in that same workspace with the code. So while writing the paper, you can also do the analysis. It all becomes possible. And finally, if you decide to export, here export it. Let me say export. Then as a file, it gets exported. This takes a little time too. It runs the paper export skill, which is ready to go, and exports as configured. And now, remember those references we attached earlier? When you export to DOCX through the export skill, it follows the papers. reference style that we specified, and builds the references accordingly. So, you get the advantage of not needing a bibliography manager like EndNote, and it also takes a little time, so I'll pause. Okay, it took about 3 minutes. It says the file is made. We haven't made the figures and tables yet, so those won't be in there, but what's inside looks pretty well organized. Let's open the DOCX and check. To open the DOCX, a new file link was created here. Let me download the export. You can see it's open now, looking at it. The title, the abstract, and basic things like italics are all applied. This was built based on a tag, and the tag displays citations in the style you want. And now, it's formatted as a review paper, and the content seems well developed. Of course, we have to read it all because the AI sometimes repeats itself, and we need to tell it to remove duplicates. And sometimes it writes in a direction we don't want. For example, we want to talk about a bright future, but the AI is a bit gloomy by nature and keeps saying this probably won't work. So we have to steer it. No, we want to talk about a bright future. After the conclusion, you can see the references were created too. The references, written here as references. You just render them. References done. Where did the size go? Ah, here it is. And with that, we're done. Of course, you'll want to review it a bit more later. But if you use this to write in a more advanced way, there's no doubt you'll be able to write far more easily. Almost all of my own work has moved over to this, and I hope you'll give it a try too. And with that, I'll wrap up this video about DIVO Incorporated's product, SCIVO. Thank you.